Greetings and welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. I'm Phyllis Hollis, your host. As an extension of my Instagram page, Cerebral Women, this podcast offers insights into the visual art world. I interview artists, mainly artists of color and female artists who will freely articulate what inspires their creativity. In addition, you'll hear interesting perspectives from dedicated art professionals who work with artists and the art institutions that feature them. I'm confident that collectively, these individuals will indeed stimulate your mind as they do our eyes. Please know these interviews are conducted in my Manhattan apartment, so please forgive the background sounds of city life. Welcome to the Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. In this episode of the Cerebral Women podcast, I feature photographer Michael Halsband. Michael grew up in Manhattan, attended SVA, the School of Visual Arts, and started his career photographing musicians and other artists. He was a tour photographer with the Rolling Stones, a fashion photographer working with prestigious brands. He worked with several magazines such as Interview, Avenue, Rolling Stones, and many of the Condé Nast publications. He has worked with personalities such as Klaus Nomi, Lydia Lunch, James Brown, Al Pacino, Hunter S. Thompson, and Johnny Depp, to name a few. While I am definitely impressed with his complete bio, what captured my attention was his honest and revealing story about his time spent with Jean-Michel Basquiat. In this interview, we did not talk about Michael's photography. We talk about a journey and adventure of two young men brought together by photography. It's a story that I want to share with my listeners, and it's a story that I want to thank Michael Halsband for sharing with me. Michael, welcome to my Cerebral Women podcast. The last time we had a one-on-one conversation was in your kitchen. We were enjoying some delicious vegetables and quite a bit of tequila. If I remember correctly, my brain was pretty stimulated, but it was definitely more from the conversation. I really am excited to share with listeners your experience and insights into the world of Jean-Michel Basquiat. It was two young artists, one black, one white, with different life experiences, building a special yet short friendship and embracing whatever came your way. I think there are a lot of us that cherish that type of life experience. So let's get started. Let's start from the moment you met Andy Warhol and how that transitioned.
So yeah, the Fillmore East, and Andy was always there every night hanging out in the lobby. So I saw this guy, and he seemed kind of creepy, white hair and older guy, and there was some other people also in the lobby who were a bit sketchy, trying to always hit up on me, and I felt so I lumped him in with them, and I didn't, but I knew who he was, and then as years went by, he just got bigger and bigger, and then I guess it was 1978, so, figure 11 years later, I get this assignment from ArtNews magazine because I'm hustling while I'm in art school. Because I started SVA in 76, and I graduated in 80. But I was all over it. Everything I learned, I put it right to practice in trying to get gigs. So I went out. I was walking. I had gone to ArtNews and gotten this interesting assignment to make a portrait of 8 artists in their studio. And the editor-in-chief said, let's split the list in half, and you go after 4 of them, and we'll go after 4 of them. And on my list was Andy Warhol, and I thought, really? Oh man, how am I going to find Andy Warhol? It's just, so, he's probably as hard to get to as the Stones, or it's just going to be hard because he's probably got a lot of handlers and whatever. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around it, and I'm asking around the other artists I know, and then it was like 3 days later, it was like a weekend, and I'm walking up Madison Avenue, and we pass Andy. It's like Madison and the 63rd, just like right around here. And we pass Andy, and we get about a half a block away, and I turned to my girlfriend, and I said, wait a second, I got to ask him if, I'm just going to run back and ask him. And I ran back, and Madison was empty. Like there was nobody. It was like a Saturday morning or something really early. And I run back, and I'm out of breath. And I said to Andy, hey, Andy, my name's Michael Halsband, and I'm working on this story, 8 artists in their studios for ArtNews magazine. And would you be interested in, I told him the whole story, and he said, oh, sure. Yeah, I'd love to do that. Wow. And so I said, are you sure? Are you sure? Like, because he said, call my studio and just tell them that, who you are. And I was like, I said, are you sure that, you're not just fucking around with me, right? And he's like, no. I'm like, he knew, he's like, no, I want to do it. So I was like, okay. Great. And I called the next day, and they said, yeah, when do you want to do it? And so I went up there, and I did the portrait, and then he gave me a copy of his latest book, A to B or whatever. And then he took me on a tour of the factory and introduced me to everybody at interview. And he said, we'd love for you to work for interview. And I was like, wow, great. Yeah, I'd love to. And so I started working, making portrait, getting assignments and working with them. And that went on, all the way past his, actually, I don't know, I guess after he passed away, I didn't work for them much anymore. But it was the beginning of my working at interview. And then in 80, ArtNews asked me if I would make a portrait of Andy for the cover of ArtNews, which is a big deal for me. And Andy came over alone, and we made the portrait. And it's, back in 1980, it wasn't quite, I don't know, what it sort of blew up to be, where people come with a whole entourage, and I don't allow that to this day. Like, if somebody wants to make a portrait with me, we got to just do it, the two of us, and leave it at that. But then I kept working with interview over all of those years, and then Andy would invite me to these dinners and all sorts of fun little events and things over the time. Yeah, so it was really fun. I was always a bit intimidated by him, and then and I think Andy actually stood up for me on the Stones tour, because Andy and Mick were really close. Mm. And when we were in Texas, Andy came and visited. Andy and Fred Hughes came and visited us on the road, and I have pictures of somebody called me and said, "Hey, you got to come down this room. Andy wants to say hi." So he knew I was out on the road with them, which was really cool. And, that was a big deal for me.
I bet.
Yeah, all of it was. And I was excited that Andy even, I used to think people didn't even know who I was. I just was, this is a great career for somebody who thinks they're invisible. And that's the way I've always felt. Like, I just don't think anybody notices me. And so it's always like kind of shocking when people, it doesn't happen all the time, but when it happens and people come up to me and say, "Oh, I'm a big fan of your work," or something, I think, God, like, it's got to be a bunch of bullshit. Like, what do they want from me? They can't know me, Like, I'm not anybody, out in the world that's that, To me, I move around, and I think I could stand in a room and observe people and think nobody knows I'm here,
Some people pay attention.
I guess the people who are watching me thinking nobody's watching them. But, it's just a funny thing. Like, it worked out perfectly for this career.
And you traveled to Paris.
Yeah, so that was an interesting thing, which I've come to realize just recently from the publication of this book of Andy Warhol's pictures of his relationship, from his whole relationship with Jean-Michel Basquiat, that in 1985, I was making pictures for Area, for the club, that they were changing the whole theme and the look of the club every 6 weeks. So they were making an ad for Interview Magazine, like a full-page ad, and they were hiring me to make the picture for that ad. So the picture kind of changed. It wasn't something that was very stylistically similar. We kind of changed with the theme, and there was this one that was called, like, I think it was like, it was fashion. And I think it was the first one I did, or I think so, yeah. And I think that they, and Andy was in it. It was an odd cross-section of people. Keith Haring was in it. Steve Rubell was in it. John Sachs and Andy and Cornelia Gast. And it was and then a whole bunch of like Way Bandy and Harry King, and just this odd mix of people, and all cool people. Diane Brill. I'm trying to remember. It's just a crazy picture. There's even a horse, a full-sized horse in it. And we did it up at this studio on 31st Street on the west side. And
the horse was alive.
Live horse, a big white horse. Yeah. And anyway, in this book just recently, that came out just this past fall, there's pictures from that day, and Jean came with Andy, but Jean wasn't in the picture. He just came along to watch. So that makes me think that he saw me making this picture. Then the next time he saw me was for Area's artist theme show, Area Art. And it was always like a one-word, I guess, theme, but and then Jean was in that picture. He was central. And that was a group of artists that I photographed on the steps of Mr. Chow on 57th Street. And that night, I tried to talk to him, and he was busy drawing over people's drawings that were in a book that Mr. Michael Chow had in the restaurant. And he was just riffing off, like kind of adding to all this stuff, until somebody realized what he was doing and they grabbed it away from him. But he was so focused on that we couldn't connect. And so I kind of left it because I'd heard about Jean-Michel, and I kind of felt like, oh yeah, he, another, person of the moment kind of thing. He'll be gone, like that. Not that I had anything against him, or I hadn't even seen his work yet, but I just thought, yeah, whatever. So, easy come, easy go. And then I got a call to come to a dinner that Andy was having in the back room of Texarkana in the Village. And I kind of thought these dinners can sometimes be really, more work than fun. And I just was, but I said, yeah, I'll come to Texarkana, because they had this amazing honey dip fried chicken, and I was like, not going to pass that up for free. So I came in late, like 15 minutes late, and the table was, everybody was sitting down, and there was one seat left at the table next to Jean-Michel. And I thought, oh boy, this is going to be rough. I'll, whatever. I'll just get through it. And I sat down, and he turned to me right away, and he said, hey, I've been a big fan of your work. Wow. And I thought, for about 5 years, I've known your work for about 5 years. And I thought, oh, what a bunch of bullshit. And he said, yeah, that picture you did of Klaus Nomi. And I thought, wow, that was 5 years ago. That was in 1980. I thought, oh, man, he knows what he's talking about.
Feel great, huh?
I was like, wow, that's crazy. And he said, I'd like to talk talk with you about working on a project that Andy and I have. He said, hey, you want to go in the bathroom with me? And I thought, all right. And we literally stood up, and there was a bathroom right behind us, a little door. And we walked in the door, and it was a teeny little bathroom, like just big enough for a toilet seat and a teeny little sink, and not for two people to stand in and have a conversation necessarily. But there we were. He lit up a joint, and he said, Andy and I we made these paintings together. We've collaborated on a whole bunch of work, and we're going to have an exhibition at Tony Shafrazi's gallery. And we have this idea to make a poster, like a boxing poster, to advertise the show. And would you be interested in making that picture? And I thought, in my mind, it was like, I said, sure, yeah, I'd love to. But I was thinking to myself, like, I'm never going to get this picture. Like, this is like the second anybody hears about this, like, there's 1,000 photographers who will step over me to get this, and wouldn't even think, they wouldn't even know that they're just going to get somebody better than me in a split second. And he said, great, yeah, great. We'll I'll have somebody contact you and make the plan, and we'll do it next. I don't think we had a time frame, but anyhow, we walked out of the bathroom, and Andy was sitting like a couple seats. He was sitting at the head of the table, and just a couple seats over from us. And Jean, stood there at the table and said to Andy, hey, Andy, Michael's going to make that picture for the poster for us. And Andy said, oh, but we've already asked Robert Mapplethorpe to do it. And I thought, I was like, yeah, you see, there it is. Like, didn't even last 30 seconds. And Jean said, nope, Michael's going to do it. And Andy said, oh, great, I love Michael's portraits, And
that was that?
And I got a call the next day from Tony saying, yeah, I'm told that you're going to do this picture. And I said, yeah. I was like, he said, well, when how's next week? And I was sort of like still not really convinced that we were going to do it. And then he said, I said, sure, next week. It's great. And the day came, and my studio manager, the buzzer rang, my studio manager came over, my assistant and I were unpacking from a job. And she said, hey, are you expecting Tony Shafrazi? And I said, no. I said, I don't think so. And I said, oh, wait a second. Oh my God, I forgot. I'm photographing Jean-Michel Basquiat and Andy Warhol today. And the two of them looked at me like, what? And I was like, yeah, we got to do this shoot, and I told my assistant, I said, Drew, let's set up a white background and look like we were the plan, that we knew about it, that we were prepared. Yeah, we set it up literally. I said to Susan White, I said, just go down and go slow, just take your time bringing them up here, and we'll get it roughed out. And then John came over, and Tony, I have some video footage from that day just to sort of look at, and then Andy showed up, and we did the shoot really from the beginning, because Tony showed up with 2 shopping bags from Paragon Sporting Goods with the boxing gloves and the trunks. So it was, the stuff was there, and they were just kind of putting it on and playing with it. And Jean took his pants off, and he had shorts on underneath, like boxer shorts. And so the first pictures are like Jean in boxer shorts and Andy with a Everlast t-shirt, and they both have the gloves on, and Jean takes the first punch at Andy, and Andy, the expression on Andy's face is like, what did I get myself into here? Like, this is raw, this is real. And And then we worked through that. The shoot was 15 rolls of film. It was about an hour, and then we were done. And we basically covered like individual pictures, and then double the double pictures, and then we kind of felt like we had enough variety. I think because I wasn't really looking for anything. I was trying to just fulfill the idea, their concept. It wasn't, that wasn't really my kind of photo shoot.
Were you expecting it to be longer than an hour?
No, I just wanted to get it over with. I was pretty much like just give them what they want and get it done. Really? I did not think that was an important photo shoot. It just felt like something like others photo shoots I'd done for interview, let's say, that were very conceptual, and I always looked at them as more novel than something serious for me, so I just sort of felt like, hey, you got what you need? Cool. I'm good, like it felt good to me. And I did feel like there were moments there that I felt like, no, this is good, like we got something cool. But I didn't think it was historical or like, anything big.
It certainly is historical.
Oh yeah, I see. I mean, I'm the one that sees that more, like on an everyday basis, right. In the sense of, all the attention that I've seen it get. It's awesome. I mean, last year we went to Paris Photo, to Gagosian exhibited 12 images from my travels with Jean-Michel, and some images from the sitting with Andy and Jean-Michel with the boxing gloves. And I thought, I took a moment to say, we wouldn't even be here right now if it wasn't for Jean-Michel. Like, this is an amazing experience for me in my life, but it would not have happened at all if Jean-Michel, and I didn't, that if he didn't choose me, to do this job and to work with him.
How long were you in each other's lives?
I'd say a year plus. I mean, I kept reaching out to him from time to time, and because right after that photo shoot, we went traveling together. I brought him the film to see from the sitting, and he loved it, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing tomorrow?" And I said, "Well, I'm around. I'm hanging. I'm just here." Or "What are you doing these days?" Or like something like that. It was pretty vague. And I said, I'm just hanging out, working, whatever. And he said, "You want to go to Paris with me tomorrow?" And I said, "Yeah, sure, let's do it." And so we took off for. Again, I didn't know how long we were going for, but. We ended up traveling for about a month together, and
what was that like?
Like all of August, pretty much. We left on Bastille Day, and we were back kind of end of August. So almost a month and a half. It was amazing, and it was intense because. I didn't know what I was going to do, and slowly we kind of got into a kind of a track of like we were going to travel together, and we went down to Portugal. We went to Lisbon first, but we were in Paris for like a week of like about a week first, and then we realized it was just going to be the two of us because we went there with Eric Good, but Eric took off to. Pursue this young model girl who
that happens.
Yeah, absolutely understandable. But it just put Jean and I together. And Jean said, "What are your plans? What are you going to do?" And I said, "Hey man, I came with you. I got no plans. So I'm just hanging out." And he said, "Great, you want to travel together?" And I said, "Yeah, let's do it." And he's like, "All right, let's go." And we took off, and right away I could see that there was difficulty with getting around. people wouldn't pick us up in taxis. When we got to the airport, we got searched. It just felt like, man, what's this, like all this unnecessary resistance, that I had never experienced in my life. Right. And I was like, this is bad, and it started to wear on my patience. And Jean, at first he was like, not saying much about it. And then I started to get more agitated over time because it was happening everywhere we went and all the time.
And
so
what do you think, what was the result of? Why was there persistence? Was it his appearance, black man?
Yeah, he had, the hairstyle, like the hair sticking up, and Yohji Yamamoto sunglasses, Comme des Garçons, Armani clothing. He had a lot of good he dressed very well, but also very, he stood out a bit. Didn't stand out to me, but then we were traveling in like sometimes rural areas, and he wasn't trying to blend in. He was just being himself, which was great, but it was probably shocking to people to see a person like that. And he also had no credit cards and was traveling with $50,000 in $100 bills. So it was. I made a deal with him up front because I said, this is uncomfortable, you paying for everything. Why don't you let me pay for things where we need credit cards to do that, or that would make more sense to pay in credit cards. So like hotel bill or, stuff like that. And so airline tickets, and then you can pay for the cash things, like food and whatever. And he was like, cool, okay, yeah. But he's super generous to a fault sometimes. It just felt like I just didn't want to be paid for all the time. Mm-hmm. But, but he never thought twice about it. I think with him, I first realized that, like, the more generous you are, the more things come your way. Like, the more, like, everything just flows. Like, if you're tight, then everything's tight. Like, it's just, the world is tight around you. Like, I don't know. It's just an observation I made in that moment with being around him, because he would trip over himself to be the one to pay for everything. And I kind of thought, what's the upside? Like, like, he must be getting something from that.
It made him feel good.
Yeah. And so I realized, like, and that too, which is an awesome thing, right?
Feels good to give.
Yeah. And so he was a great example in a lot of ways for behavior in general. He had a wonderful way about things. And even when I was really struggling with all this resistance from people around us that we would encounter, and, trying to check into a hotel, or I tried to get him into a hotel. He wanted to stay. He always wanted to do the best things. So it was like, I want to wear the best clothes. I want to eat the best food. I want to stay in the best hotels. Everything I want to do, I want to do it the best. So I was like, okay, well, and he said, where do you think the best hotel is in Paris? And I said, well, I like the Crillon. I think I've never stayed there, but it's just an awesome looking place, and it faces out over the Place de Concorde. And, I don't know, just felt, and he said, well, hey, do you think I could get a room in there? And I was like, well, let me call up. And I said, I called the hotel, and I said, I want to book a room, single, just one person. And do you have something that faces the Place de Concorde? And they said, yeah, we have one room left facing the Place de Concorde, $450 a night. And I said, hey, Jean, $450 a night. And he was like, it's all right. I was like, God, that's crazy, but all right. And I booked it. And then he went over there, and they turned him down.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I said, put the guy on the phone. I just made the reservation. And I would have never thought twice, like if it was for me.
Think like that.
Yeah, I would have never thought to ask who I'm making the reservation with, or who, or just what, whatever you would want to know that you're not being run around or going to get turned down. So he so that was my first sort of like that angered me because I kind of stuck him out there, and then that and that happened to him. I felt very personally responsible for that, and then I took it personally every time we sort of walked into a situation and I couldn't get the result that I was accustomed to. But
how old were you during that?
29.
So you still...
He was 24. Yeah. I was old. Old then.
You have a great life. God, those 20s for you were...
Oh, yeah.
Man, oh, man.
And then, when we were down in Portugal, and then there was also just his way of getting through the day, which was really difficult for me. Because I wasn't really used to doing so much... getting high during the day, which just changed a lot of things in the way the day went.
Right.
And then
Not
into
as
the
productive.
night, yeah. Well, productive. It's sort of like your work method. Your work way, like versus. It's like his way of functioning and working and processing things was just radical for me to kind of like try to adjust to. And since we were traveling together, I did not feel like I could put up any kind of resistance or draw a line. I just sort of rolled with his way. And it frustrated me because I felt like the day deteriorated very quickly after, sometime in the afternoon. And then I realized, that it's just, a coping way. It's like he's up against this reality, that I'm not seeing, the same way. And his ability, his way, the way he figured out how to deal with it and navigate it was tremendous, for him. It just was too much for me. I was soft that way. I couldn't, kind of wrap my head around where I needed to get, how I needed to get with it, and what I needed to do to get with it. And I got into a fight one night. We went out to a club, and it was really late, and we were down at the end of Portugal, outside of the place we had gone to was Faro, but we backtracked like 12 miles back to go to some nightclub because he wanted to dance. He loved dancing, and he loved, loved music, loved dancing. But so I thought we were going to have one quiet night, but nope. He managed to find a club for us to go to, and we drove up, took a taxi there, got up there, hung out, and it actually turned out to be a lot of fun. And we were there till like 2:00, and then they were closing, and we went outside. And there was no taxi to be found. And we went to, there was one taxi who was off duty. Then he decided he was going to take us. And we were, okay, get in the taxi. And I'm thinking, oh, great, we're going to make it home first time. And before like 4 and 5 in the morning. And Jean says, I'm kind of hungry. And I was like, oh, dude, no, don't do this. And the taxi driver says, I know where we can get some food. And I was like, are you fucking serious? Like, is this really happening? This is a nightmare. And he goes, we go to this Roadhouse bar, and they have like steak sandwiches, and it's just filled with guys, smoky, pool table in the back. It's like classic. The bar is filled with guys, and all the tables and chairs filled with people. It's 2:30 in the morning, and it just was amazing. And then we ate, and I had invited the taxi driver to
join you.
If he wanted to eat, because he went and sat at the bar with some friends. And I said, hey, if you want to eat, let me know. Or no, it's okay. And then as soon as we're done eating, he says, yeah, you know what? I'm hungry. I'm going to have something to eat. And I was like, this is a nightmare, So he gets food, and then I'm just falling asleep standing up. Like I decided to try to go out and just lay in the back seat of his car. And he comes out and he says, no, you can't lay in the seat of the car. You can't lay down. And I was like, oh man, I'm waiting, like what? And then he comes out, he goes back in, he comes out with another guy and he says, okay, this is the deal. And he's saying this all in Portuguese. So he says, you're going to drive, one of you's going to sit in the front, one of you's going to sit in the back. And my friend's going to sit in the back too. So I was like, no, we're not doing that. We started out this drive, the three of us, and we're going to keep going, or we're not going with you. And he said, okay, fine, then I'm not taking you. And I said, and Jean's standing over my shoulder, and he says, now what are you going to do? And I'm yelling at this guy, and now the parking lot's filled with everybody's come out from the bar. So now there's a big circle around us, all these guys, and I reach down, the whole parking lot is filled with these big stones, like smooth big stones, and I pick up two, and I'm like, just yelling at the guy. And this guy steps out of the crowd and he says, I understand English, I can speak English. And he said, the guy's just nervous that you're going to rip him off. And I said, well, we're not going to rip him off. I'm scared that he's going to rip us off because we don't know our way around here, and screw him. So Jean's like, Jean's over my shoulder going, man, where do you think this is going? Like, where are you going with this? And I was like, I don't know, but I'm not letting him take advantage of us. And I don't know what, it was late. And I said, okay, screw it, man. We're out of here. And I was like, and we walked up. I threw the rocks down and we walked out on the road. It was a 2-lane road. And I could see the lights to the town far away, really. I mean, it's just insane. And I thought, well, maybe we'll be able to hitchhike or something, but I am not getting in that car. And we walk out on the road and it is pitch black, like a moonless night. And we're walking down the road and Jean says, he kind of drifts back and then I see him light up a joint. And he says, I always knew we'd be friends. And he's like, choking on this joint, on the smoke. And I turn back, it's like, oh, this is a perfect time to do that, John. Yeah, this is great. Now we're out here and you're going to get high. And he laughs and he says, I always knew we'd be friends. And I was like, and it shocked me in that moment. It just kind of was stunning in the sense that I thought, so this is the moment, this is the telling moment, that I'm at my angriest and he somehow
connected.
It's my most open, and, all guard down, just flat out, pure me, whatever. And it just was stunning, like I thought, wow, okay, all right. So I thought we were friends all this time, but I guess I was still keeping something, holding, putting up somewhat of a front, Yeah. So yeah, we managed to walk almost all the way back. We did get a taxi, but it was like, I don't know, we were maybe less than a mile from the hotel at that point. Well, we'd walked through the night. It was like 10 miles or something. We'd walked till till the light came up. And we got back to the hotel and I said, hey man, I just can't do this, John. I just can't, do this. And he said, I understand. He was laying on the bed and he was just like looking up at the ceiling and he's like, I understand. And I said, I've got to go, man. I just can't keep traveling like this with you. And I took off back to Paris and I went back to New York. I left him and then Jean went to Amsterdam, and about 3-4 days later, he called me and he said, hey, I'm heading back to Paris. You want to meet there? And I was like, sure. And it had just given me enough time to sort of like calm down and reflect on it all. And I thought, no, I really regret, like having left. I kind of, chickened out, like I kind of felt
exhausted, mentally, physically.
Yeah, but then I realized like I need to do this. Like I need to be able to do this like in the way that I think I can, and And then we went back and hung out for another like 3-4 weeks, like just traveling. We stayed in Paris, and then we went to Italy and hung out there. And yeah, I was more, I knew what I got myself into at that point. I think it was just a bit of a shock the first time. But
so what shape were you in by the time you got back to the U.S.?
Well, I think we were really close at that point. We'd both been down pretty hard to, like, I think Jean went through some stuff when we were in Italy that was tough for both of us, for him especially, but I think I saw him wrestling with some issues and nobody there to help him. And I think, like, in general, when we got back to the city, he constantly reached out to get together for lunch or go to the museum or go, do stuff together or hang out or just whatever. And, but we spent a lot of time talking and hanging out. And then Andy, then the show happened, and the review was devastating for Jean. He didn't want to talk to Andy anymore, and I was there the day he read the review.
What show was this? I'm sorry.
It was the collaboration show with his and Andy Warhol's collaboration works, and there was a big review in the New York Times which just painted Jean out to be Andy's boy, and it just upset Jean. And I tried to reason with Jean and say, don't blame it all on Andy, first of all, and maybe just try to talk it out and figure it out before you just shut Andy down. And Jean looked at me like, whose side are you on, kind of thing. Like, he never said anything, but he looked at me like, corner of his eye, like, not sure about you now. And I thought, I could feel it. It was like tangible, that there was all of a sudden a percentage of distrust in me, for me. And
once that happens, it's hard to go back.
Yeah, and then it happened again because Andy confronted me and asked me if I could get a message to Jean, and I relayed the message to Jean, which, you don't have to do what people tell you to do. Like, I've learned that lesson, but the hard way. But Jean again looked at me like, okay, another 10%, another percentage of like, not sure whose side you're on, And we stayed friends, but it was affected by those two moments, and I learned a lot from that. Like, it was those were lessons hard learned at the cost of a friendship that was, pure.
Yeah.
But, and I think there wasn't much I could do. I felt like Jean did what he wanted to do all the time anyway. It wasn't nobody was going to have any real impact. And I think he tried to. There was a part of him that I know that, like, I had a bad temper growing up, and I would do things that were sometimes I don't know. I'm trying to figure out how to describe this because I haven't actually ever talked about this, but I've thought a lot about it. But Jean sometimes did things that I thought I was like, wow, I've been this has been beat out of me not to behave this way, but I'm impressed that somehow it's preserved in you and you do it. It's like, dumping a bowl of fruit on Mary Boone's head as like she's walking out of his studio, or like things that he did that you want to do but you don't do them, but he would do them. And I thought, oh, well, where's that going to get you? Like, let me see how this plays out, because I'm always tempted to behave this way, but I don't do it because I've been
conditioned.
Yeah.
Trained.
Yeah, but it was a wildness that he
refused
had
to let go of.
Yeah, and I thought, oh, good for you, man. Good for you for getting it done. For doing that, for reacting those ways. But it didn't play out well, and
Price.
and it's unfortunate. Like I see how one needs to behave to get along in the world. But and I'm not like. I have no point to make with this. I don't, know, my internal dialogue. Luckily, I have a lot of people around me who can talk me down, and I wish John would have had that or had an openness to
listen.
Yeah.
Obey.
That's a hard one to. Yeah, I guess. I don't know. It's hard, that's a hard thing. We live in a funny world. But yeah, artists are in a tough spot. You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
So your friendship changed? You fell apart?
Yeah, I just couldn't just keep calling and getting blown off. And I just felt like at a certain point he drifted away. And I know that, the drugs had a lot to do with it. I took it personally, of course, but I didn't think like there was anything much I could do. But yeah, no, he when we ran into each other, it was always like, yeah, let's get back together, let's get together, let's catch up. And he was always, very enthusiastic. And then he would just drift back into whatever he was in. And I'd drop by from time to time. I kept coming around. And keeping my side of it going. It's just that he was, I think that, things got just more and more complicated for him. And then my career took my time away and ran into him shortly. Maybe it was the spring of '88. I saw him at Andy's funeral or memorial at St. Patrick's Cathedral, but I'd seen him before that and after that. But that was a heavy moment. He walked out of there. He didn't stick around for it. But I think he was probably turned off by the people who showed up and the reason they showed up. It was like just a scene to be made. But then in the spring of '88, I ran into him at a club. He was dancing alone, and he grabbed me and he said, "Hey, who cleans your place? Like, how do you clean your place?" And I said, "Oh, I have a woman who cleans it for me." And he said, "How many times? Like, how does it work?" And I said, "Well, she comes twice a week." And he said, you think she's available the other 5 days a week for me? Like, it was like really sweet. And I said, well, I can ask her for you, and she said, no, she's busy. And so I got back to him and I said, no, she's busy, but her sister's free. And so he hired her sister, Blanca, and Blanca worked for him. And it was like this fast, like super tight relationship with him and her, between him and her family. He took them out to dinner. He took them to musicals, and he was like that. He just, would just adopt everybody and just bring them all in really close. So it was Blanca who called me on August 12th and said, Jean was not looking good. Sweaty and no air conditioner in his room, and he has foam coming out of his mouth. And I said, well, who's there? Like, call 911, call the police. And she said, well, no, the girl who lives in the basement said, it's okay, just leave him, to sleep. And then I said, well, if there's somebody else there, I guess it's okay, but I don't know, Blanca, I don't know, what to tell you. It just sounds like if somebody else is there, I guess like maybe just do whatever they think is best. And I hung up, and she called back an hour later and said that he was dead.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it was crazy. And I got off the phone. I was like on the phone in the kitchen out in the Hamptons and in Watermelon. I said to my mom, I said to my family, I was like, wow, Jean-Michel just died. God. Yeah, it was crazy.
How did it affect you? I mean, were you...
It was shocking because I just thought, wow, how life can just, how fragile, like, wow, it's just, he's gone. That's crazy. I mean, I guess I felt really guilty that maybe, what could I have done? I don't know. Like...
Yeah, you weren't there.
Friends were there. They saw him the day before. They had plans to catch up and whatever. And so he wasn't on any kind of mission or anything but, I don't know. It was... yeah. I mean, God, there's endless stories to this.
I bet there are endless stories.
No, I do remember there's stuff that like is, just watching him. He wasn't. I don't think he was in a great place at the end. I know I'm supposed to be talking about myself, but it's hard.
This is no.
Yeah, it's it was a lot of it is taken very personally in the sense that you get to be intimate with somebody and watch how they choose to live their life and how it works or doesn't work, or what works and what doesn't work for them, and that ties into my work in a way that's like very, to observe. And learn and sort of make note of human nature and how we are exposed to the world from birth, and then what we choose to accept without question, and then what we question, or decide to explore our own ways, And I think that, parents can be very strong, and it can matter or not matter. People can do the best they can to help each other, and it can have impact or not. And we're sort of free to make the choices we make, and sort of it's hard to change too. It's really hard to change. So,
And you're hanging out with geniuses, musical geniuses, artists. I mean, you're hanging out with some pretty heavy-duty brains. Keith,
yeah.
I mean, and then Warhol, yeah. Huh.
And lots of pressure with success. I know for myself that anytime I experience any kind of recognition or success, it has an incredibly... I have a very difficult time with it, and I can imagine when it comes on, if it would ever come on more than I could handle, it would be it'd be hard. It'd be really painful because it's already confusing in a small dose, and to hold on, to try to keep your feet on the ground, stay grounded is it could become like a complete, preoccupation of like unto itself, that it just be, it's sort of like it goes out of control, and even though you want it, you don't even know what you want, and so then when you have it's so just like it's corrupting and distorting in so many ways that people throw themselves at when I experienced it with the Rolling Stones, people throwing themselves at the band or anybody next to the band. It was just like, even me, I was just seeing it firsthand, first person. And I just thought, what is wrong with us? Like, what is with humanity? Like, we're so willing to throw ourselves away for people who we think are better than us. And it's not, that's such a weird, distorted view to have, that anybody's better. And then the perspective that, that gave me was not, didn't sort of result in disappointment, necessarily. It wasn't like I was disappointed in people for feeling that way. I mean, because listen, it is pretty amazing, to create something, a song or a painting. It's pretty amazing. But at the same time, what's amazing about it is how fearlessly honest people would allow themselves to create on a level that resonates with so many others. And then that's worth celebrating and sharing and supporting. But then there's this other thing that happens, which is just like, it messes everybody up, on both sides. So I don't, I'm like talking about this, but I don't know if I have a complete thought about it, or any kind of way to wrap it up. But it's just it's just that I've been so fascinated with pop culture. I've been such a fan, but at the same time, I'm also kind of documenting it in the best way I think I can.
When did it cross your mind to document the time you spent with him?
Yeah, I mean, I forget who this professor was and who I spoke to one day who called me about Jean-Michel. This was 20 years ago or something. And I told a bit of this story, and she was like, this is incredible. Like, you're kind of awakening to, a situation that very few, white people, allow themselves to endure, yes, to experience and appreciate. Right. And I was like, if it could teach people, I learned so much from that experience with him, because it's so emotional, it's so tied in and complex. It's so complex.
But you understood him. You had a connection with him. You connected with him.
Well, and he let me. Yeah, he mastered it and minded it in the way that I walked in like an innocent,
20-something-year-old
white boy from New York City, thought he had it all figured out. Hey, check this out. Check this out.
Oh, so you thought you had it all figured out, huh?
Oh, of course I did.
Oh, that's right, because you had worked with the Stones and everything, right? You were
innocently cocky, I don't think I ever, I think I just felt like I could do whatever I wanted.
So that was a real adventure then. Wow. Yeah.
Oh, I mean, I think it's just I think that she felt like, wow, this is an interesting, sort of plane to have explored, like in the sense that, you kind of had a lot of self-realization from not having walked in this path before, so that it's in a sense, it's like, hey, I've never walked into an airport and been strip searched, and John was like, don't get upset here. This is not the place to lose it, because they have all the control right now. In the parking lot, there was a little more room for humor, because I was really much more upset at that point in Portugal in the parking lot. I was like,
you had the rocks in your hand.
Fuck you, fuck this.
You picked up those rocks.
I'm fucking done, and John's over my shoulder going, really?
Calm down.
What are you going to do with that? Where are you going with this? It's almost like
our asses kicked.
He was like,
you don't calm down.
I'm sure he's been in worse situations. So for him, he was just sort of talking into my ear, where do you think you're going to, where are you going with this?
Right.
What do you think you're going to do? Because he wasn't so scared for himself as much. He was probably just like, dude, you're losing it. It's not going to work for you. Yeah. Look around, it's not, you're not going to win this one. But, it's a funny situation, because in his voice was such a confidence of knowledge, a sense of experience that got so deep in me in that moment. And I felt like, wow, I'm a fucking idiot. You know, like I am really fucking up here, but only because I'm this spoiled person who doesn't have a sense of like, of a limit, you know, like
It's that too, but I think you were emotionally just really caught up.
It was a collision, yeah.
You were really caught up, and you had no fear. I mean, for you to pick up those rocks, and you're surrounded by all these men.
Oh yeah.
But you had no fear at that point. You were invincible at that point. But I don't know if it's because, you know, you're a privileged young white guy. I think that you were so emotionally connected with the entire, and so disturbed by it all, that you just, you know, it's like that person, you know, hear about that person who's lifts up the car, all of a sudden they have the power to lift up a car to save someone, you know, and it's, where did that come from?
I'm amazed that I've made it this far without being just completely, you know, destroyed by people that I've gone up against, and somehow they take it so seriously. Like it goes beyond physical strength. It goes beyond, it's like my conviction in what I believe in, or where I'm coming from with the anger is like overtaking the situation. It sort of paralyzes or freezes the moment, you know, and nobody like has come back at me, you know, like I feel like, you know, justified in my, you know, it's like I'm not being righteous. I believe this is right.
Exactly.
And there's no, you know, like, and, you know, I don't know. It's funny because when he laughed, you know, when he lit up that joint on the road and he laughed, and I was like, it just shocked me because I was like,
you were so disturbed and tightened.
Well, it was like that, but I was so mad at him. In that moment, my anger at him for getting high all the time and, you know, getting high at all the wrong times for me or whatever was so absolutely out there, you know, like it was like, no, I am just furious and I'm furious with you. And he was like, cool, man, I always knew we'd be friends. You know, like it was like, holy shit, you know, like, man, that was like a powerful sort of lightning bolt of a moment where I just realized like, oh, wow, I am like most of the time just full of shit until pushed to the edge. And then I become real. I become myself. And it's like, how do I get there? You know, all the time. And the thing is, he was there. Look how there he was. He's so there. He was so there then. He's still there now.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, it's insane how, you know, powerfully connected to himself and all the dialogue. Like I just looked at a show up at the Guggenheim and I thought, you know, every time I look at his work, I learn more from it. And it's, you know, to use these chemical, you know, formula, you know, like these, to create these, to use that platform to speak to other things, you know, it's just like, I don't know. There was so much that he was sort of, the way he was looking at his work and what he was saying, and the way, and traveling around with him and looking at how he processed things, you know, in general. And it was all very much like a, you know, not calculated, you know, shared a room, you know, hotel room for all those weeks, and, you know, and it felt like we were family. Like there was no discomfort with anything. Yeah. Strange. I mean, I'm not strange, great, but, you know, maybe that's also, I'm not a person that has any discomfort with sharing rooms or crashing with people or whatever. You know, I've crashed out in some pretty messed up places just because out of necessity. and made it work, you know, in terms of just like, hey, you know, it's like going to school and sharing a room with somebody. And, you know, it's just,
You're sleeping on a bed.
just crashing out. Yeah. And
just sleeping on a bed,
no big deal.
more.
But I didn't know, like spending that much time together, nothing stood out to me as, but I wasn't looking for that. And I don't think, you know, it definitely wasn't strong enough to sort of, you know, get in our way of like going and sit in a wine bar in Paris and killing 4 hours eating
wonderful.
and drinking and talking, you know, like that. So yeah, it was fun, like in that, you know, way that we were always happy to have each other's company and just have constant dialogue of talking about artists, talking about anything, you know. Yeah, it was fun, you know, that way, and relationships. And he asked me once, he was like, how much money do you make a day? Like, what's your day rate? And I said, well, I make about $1,500 a day. He said, yeah, me too. And I said, yeah, well, but the difference is you make $1,500 every day, and I'm only making it on the days that I work. So, you know, like I was like, I'm not really making $1,500 a day.
So you commented that he'd carry
50,000, yeah, in cash,
really?
yeah, in a roll in his pocket.
Are people just paying him cash for his work?
I think so, yeah. I don't think he had a bank account. I mean, everybody in those documentaries that I've seen, I did not question it. So I didn't, you know, I was like, I thought it was impressive to me, but I didn't think like, wow, that's a bad thing. You know, it's like, lucky you, you got cash.
50,000, that's a lot. Michael, this has been great. I absolutely appreciate you
together,
coming
and that's
here.
special.
No,
yeah.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And everything you have to say it's important. It is important because it's curiosity about you and a lot of the people that you've interacted with over the years. So
Yeah. No, we covered some good stuff.
Some great history.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Cerebral Women Art Talks podcast. For additional content, please visit cerebralwomen.com and be sure to follow Cerebral Women on Instagram.